Hi, my name's Ann Dolman, and I'm a member of the grade 11 course, happen to be the teacher, and I'm going to be explaining Urban Indians in the DTES, which stands for Downtown East Side by Jay Simpson. I chose this poem because as an educator, I feel a commitment to the Truth and Reconciliation's call for actions, and they call upon education and educators and teachers to build the capacity of our students to understand the Truth and Reconciliation calls for action. I also like the challenge of free verse. So there's two reasons there. I put this image of education is what got us here and education is what will get us out. Justice Marie Sinclair is the person that headed up the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, and I find him an inspiring person. And yeah, so that's why I chose this poem. Who is the author? The author is Jay Simpson. Jay Simpson. They are an Ojibwe non-binary trans woman from Sabotewayak Cree Nation, Treaty 4, which is in basically Manitoba. They live in the unceded territory of Mesquim, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, which is also known as Vancouver. Summary of the poem. If I was to summarize a poem, this is what I wrote. By sharing their experience of the downtown east side of Vancouver, the narrator challenges the simple story that Indigenous women go missing and are murdered because they are drug addicts and sex workers. Rather, the anguish of their lives are from the machines of genocide and colonization. Here are my favorite lines from the poem. I ran onto Main and Hastings, cried out in anguish. This place called cold, called heartless, called monster and maw was never the culprit, and the blame was never to be my mother's or sister's. Rather, machines of genocide placed here by the illegal government voted in by our now neighbors. I think they're my favorite lines because I like that the build up from the repetition and the alliteration there, and also the switch or the epiphany. So it's not about the place being awful. It's not about these awful people. It's about the impact of genocide. And that's the epiphany or the realization that the poem turns on. So there's a couple literary devices I want to point out. The alliteration happens in many places, but another example is lurking in the alleys, asking for something more, like ligament or limb, and that L connects the lurking to ligament or limb. There's also repetition, which is also could be alliteration and a parallel structure. In this place called cold, called heartless, called monster, and maw was never the culprit, and the blame was never to be. So that repetition of called cold, called heartless, called monster is a parallel structure, that idea that you're using the same rhythm again and again, but a simple way of saying it is repetition. And then there's the simile, squeeze life like pressing orange for juice, which is orange juice is such a nice concept, but it's so violent here in the context of the poem. And then what essential question would I be able to answer better now that I've read that poem? I chose, how does one form an identity that allows them to be true to themselves? And this is what I wrote. It is only through time and experience that we find our true identity. When we're young, our elders will tell us who we are and who we should be. It is through testing this identity with the life experiences of anguish, pain, and loss that we come to know the truth of who we are and the world we are in. In the poem Urban Indians in DTES, the narrator shifts, and there's a spelling mistake here. It should be the narrator shifts their perspective from the streets being a place of death to being a place of life. The anguish of pain and loss is not because they are destined to be destitute as Indigenous people, again, spelling error, but because of the devastating impacts of genocide and colonization. Yeah, and that's my presentation.